Nice to meet you all. My name is Alon. I'm one of the founders of Foundational. We're one of the sponsors here. Feel free to come by our booth after. We're going to talk less about us, maybe a little bit later in the presentation, and more about AI, the hot topic. But interestingly, or at least I find it interesting, there's a lot of talk about governance for AI and not as much about AI for governance. So how do we actually benefit from AI implementations to help with the ton of work that is data governance still today? So that's what we're going to talk about. Some of it, and at least that's how I wanted to build this. Not all of this is, hey, let's go purchase Foundational. I mean, that too. But all of this you can implement on your own, and I'll try to break down the pieces that you need. Most of everything you can also find maybe some open source or in-house. We'll try to actually structure it. At least that's what my view was, that you can do a lot of these things on your own, and then like always is you need to invest engineering and whatnot. So the goal is to take you through our journey, which is how you can build agentic workflows for automating a lot of the data governance work, and we'll show some examples for what we are using this today. So yes, everyone is talking about agents and agents governance and agents observability and whatnot. We wanted to explore both technically but also conceptually, how can agents work for us for data governance use cases. So what are the use cases? There's a lot, but maybe the top ones or the obvious ones are data quality. So how we can, today people are writing manual checks across different tools, across different frameworks and whatnot. How can we automate that with AI? How can we automate the monitoring and the enforcement of these rules, the root cause analysis? All of this can be potentially automated. Sometimes the tools that properly do this have this, but some of these cases, you, depending on the organization that you work, you can connect it to your LLM of choice, and that's what I will try to show. Second one is metadata. So documentation. AI does a phenomenal job of, you give it a piece of source code or a piece of code and ask it to document it. Of course, if you want the documentation to also describe the business logic, you need to do some extra checks. So that's what I will talk about. Ownership was always kind of like I wouldn't call it a hot topic, but ownership was always a painful topic in governance. And perhaps there's some things that we can do there to at least do push for the 80-20 or automate some of the stuff that are otherwise very manual. And there are more kind of like, beyond the governance 101, perhaps there are 202. So maybe sensitive data. We always had data scanners. Today, some of these are struggling with the larger environments, some of the legacy stuff. So there's a lot of challenges. Maybe AI can help with that. And I guess I stopped there for now. But maybe there are other use cases. I can talk about those too. What do we need? So this is from an OpenAI blog post that came out I want to say 3 months ago, around how OpenAI built their data agent. I think that all of our slides are getting uploaded to DGIQ. So I also put the link there. But you can do data agent OpenAI. You'll find this article. What's interesting about it is that they describe all the components pretty much, not necessarily the specifics underneath. And there's also some implied things that they did or that they have that made it easier in a sense for them, outside of obviously running with the OpenAI as the LLM. But give or take, there are some key pieces here that we can now unpack. We have the LLM, okay? Obviously, as you can see, this is 5.2. Today they are at 5.5, I think. So that's the few months of massive speed that everything is going. So we have the LLM. We have something that needs to run the agents. Sometimes today, if you have a cloud provider, it can actually be in the same place. But in a lot of cases, agents can run in multiple places. You need to decide how do you want them and where do you want them. They can be as simple as Python notebooks that run once a day, or they can be things that are more sophisticated with triggers and logic and scheduling and whatnot, but something needs to run orchestration for these agents. Context, so this is where your agents would go and learn from. In essence, I can also divide the learning to ongoing inference, for those that are familiar with the term. So they go and they look for an answer, but there's also a value in a learning phase if you want to start training and doing kind of like the effort involved in making something more sophisticated. That is also possible. It's up to you and the trade-offs that it involves. But essentially, we need them to know where to grab the answers from. And more context, right? When we now want them to do data governance, so outside of here in the top part, at least in the OpenAI case, internal data knowledge base, so you know the Zendesk and the Salesforce of the universe, and company context, I think in their case was, I want to say Notion, but maybe it was, you know, Notion, Drive, SharePoint. I don't think they use Microsoft. So documentation, and then it's more context, but this is now data context. So this is where today you would go, for example, to the warehouse and want to connect to AI all the fields that have descriptions or labels or tags, or your data catalog if it has good enough context, or maybe you worked on a DBT implementation or a PySpark implementation and there's descriptions in the code. All of that potentially is data specific context or metadata, if you will, that you can also connect to the AI. Of course, now I'm being very high level, but this is generally something that I say, but obviously OpenAI said it's very meaningful for getting that to work. And then lastly, it's interfaces. I think it's lastly. So lastly, it's interfaces. So who should work with those agents? Is it your users via Slack? Is it people through the catalog? Is it someone in a UI that if you're a large organization, you might have internal tools that can work with that? Is it other tools that can benefit from these agents? For example, tools in GitHub that the engineers are using or whatnot. So all of these are things that a lot of them are already made and you can grab them and understand how to connect. Okay, so the basics on how you can get agentic governance that is not going to be necessarily amazing from the get-go, but it's going to work. So what do you need to do to set it up? LLM, obviously, you need something that the organization approves, something that has, let's call it enough, that has the right versions. I mean, the versions that if I roughly have to separate, I think that what I'm saying is pretty much a consensus, but kind of like pre-January, the LLMs are not accurate enough to handle those types of things. Post-January, give or take, pretty decent. Like all of them are pretty good now, right? Sometimes there's also a trade-off on costs and tokens and limitations, but not necessarily going into all of that in this session. But generally, rule of thumb, post-January, you're probably okay. Knowledge tools. For governance tasks, your agents, if you want to start automating documentation, you need to give them something to learn from. So if you have a catalog, you need to understand that your catalog can connect via MCP or API to the LLM. If you have a wiki or Confluence or files in SharePoint that describes, even if it's key concepts, terminology, glossary, all kinds of these things, there is a notion around like sometimes context can be noisy if you're just like, it's not necessarily throw it everything against it, but generally they need to access the knowledge there. Most of these tools, it's like table stakes today to have MCP connections for all of the knowledge management tools. So everything can connect to OpenAI and to Claude, and I think to Gemini too, especially now with both Claude and OpenAI, they have apps the apps/integrations thing. So all of these connections exist. You can do that tomorrow. Metadata. So that's a hot topic. Because I assume a lot of people here in the room, they have metadata, but I also assume that in a lot of the cases it's partial. So it's not necessarily well documented. It's very partial for maybe some of the more sensitive fields, but not necessarily everything. Probably limited to the warehouse, like more BI side of things, and not necessarily going very upstream to the legacy Java and Python and mainframe and whatnot. But still, it's okay. Like maybe some of the governance tasks can still benefit from that. And metadata exists also in the tools that you have in the technology stack, right? So Tableau, it has metadata. Databricks via Unity Catalog, it has metadata. I don't know, Spotfire or Power BI, all of these have metadata. I haven't gone and checked if everything has an MCP connection, but if it doesn't have, if your tool doesn't have an MCP connection, you can ask, hopefully ask and get an engineer that pull from an API, which for sure they have, and translate that to an MCP. That's the trade-off, right? But most of them, they have MCP already, so I think that it's pretty safe to say that most of them can connect very natively. They may not necessarily have the native OpenAI app that is like 2 clicks to get connected, but depending on your organization, MCP, it's a few more steps and you can connect it, and it's pretty good. And the BI tool has a lot of context. So for some of the tasks, the BI tool is a very good source of knowledge. And lastly, I would say permissions. So it doesn't always concern everyone that is necessarily in this room, but generally, if you can walk through the permissions of the warehouse and the native catalog that the warehouse has, so everything kind of goes to the warehouse, then that already takes care of a lot of the lift. Again, for this kind of like build your own, at least, path that we're in. So if you want to set something quickly, simplify permissions, meaning now you can have a concern that users would go and access data sets that they should not access, right? But presumably you're already managing that on the warehouse through RBAC and all of these things. So just get the LLM to work with that permission model, and then it's probably okay. And don't start with the more complicated stuff that are harder. Okay, so first thing, everything I described here, the more modern parts of your stack, most of it is plug and play. And the things that are not plug and play, you can go to the MCP configuration pages. Usually, you know, there's an MCP URL. You can go to your LLM tool, put the MCP URL. That's it. It has the context, and you can start playing with it, you know, and seeing where you are at, and that. Today, that is quite, I think once you conceptualize it, it's quite easy to get started. Now comes the more sophisticated thing, which again, everyone here can essentially do. So, and the summary of it is more context, because context is the key thing that helps some of these governance tasks and automations to become better and actually trustworthy. You can see where you are, so you can do the previous slide, start trying out some things, see what is the quality and how much do the answers before you go into action start with Q&A, which I'll describe. So start just asking questions. What is happening here? Who is doing that? What do we have here? How is this logic? Where do we have, I don't know, duplicates? Or where can we save costs? Whatever governance task you want to do, try it and see if it has enough context or what other context you can bring in. Here is where I'm pushing something that is maybe a bit more philosophical to us, but there's a lot of context. That's essentially our kind of like our philosophy. A lot of the context lives in the source code, because a lot of the transformation logic, definitions, business logic, even comments from the engineers, they're putting them in the source code. So GitHub, I think they have an MCP connection today. I think some of the warehouses They have an MC. I don't know how well all of these works, and obviously it might work well until, I don't know, 500 repositories, and if you have 10,000, then it's a different scale. But I think that for the most part, if you're a Snowflake shop, Databricks shop, I would even say BigQuery shop, some of these things can connect to code. And again, without going now to the quality and accuracy, which is going to be a topic, you can still connect it to the code that can allow the LLM to answer more questions with more information. And also, when you connect to code, you can start exploring some governance concepts, such as pushing code changes and applying fixes and all kinds of topics that are not just the Q&A, which is what that OpenAI article that I show you, that's what they did. So that's kind of like the first step. Connect to Lineage. I assume that most of everyone in this room, they have Lineage. Why is Lineage important? Visibility, meaning it can help the LLM in the context of data understand. There might be multiple places that the LLM gets confused. When you ask it about revenue or orders or transactions or users, there's a ton of places that describe those things. So with Lineage, with a graph, essentially, that can, again, come from your catalog, the one that you have today, as good as it is, it can help the LLM be more precise. And the newer versions of LLM, I'm sure that most of you have seen this, they also reply back, and they ask you, they basically do the kind of like the double handshake, right? They ask you, hey, did you mean this or did you mean that? Or do you want me to do this or do you want me to do that thing? Or they would surface duplicates or potential confusion, and you would iterate, and it should get to better answers. So Lineage helps with that. It can direct them to the right place. And Lineage also helps with token usage, so efficiency. Why? Because if you ask them, let's imagine that you ask them about something that exists in some distant part in your warehouse. If it now needs to scan the entire metadata of the entire warehouse, the LLM is basically going to do just that, and is also going to charge you for the tokens, and maybe take the time to do it. But Lineage can give it hints to look at the graph first, understand, okay, these are the places where I should look first, and get to the answer quicker. At least that's what we've seen. And again, in terms of my objective kind of like take on this, all of you, I assume, have a data catalog of some sort of maturity, and it should have that there. So the data catalog MCP, that's what you should connect. Additional knowledge. So these are depending on your tools, but assuming you have the tools that have the MCP or API connection, what I mentioned before, that helps, at least for some of the use cases. So if it's warehouses and database, and you can now bring in logs, depending on the volume, because again, you want to be mindful of token usage. Like logs can be very intense to parse, so don't throw all of the logs to the LLMs right now. But sometimes you have a log management tool. The log management tool might have an MCP of its own. You might have Splunk or like log data lakes. They also have an MCP tool right now. So at least for this context here, logs are good. Logs are adding information that the LLMs can benefit from. BI tools, especially for those governance workflows that benefit from understanding what is actually happening in terms of the consumer, right? Okay, we have dashboards that data is flowing through, but maybe some of these dashboards are offline. Maybe some of these dashboards are not used anymore. Maybe we have hundreds or dozens or hundreds of dashboards that are actually quite similar to each other, and we want to try and simplify. So BI tools is another easy one, I would say, because they tend to be more modern. Most of the BI tools, they can be connected to LLM, and there you're starting to see, okay, some of the BI tools, they have better APIs, so they expose more data, and some of them are a bit older. Slack teams, so OpenAI talked about that too. There's information in Slack. I would say that this is actually not a debated topic. There's not much debate, but Slack is also very noisy. So I wouldn't say from my place that, oh, you have to connect to Slack, but it might be that some Slack channels, especially if your company has Q&A Slack channels, like ask the data engineer, ask this, those channels are good, right? Those channels are good because AI knows to go to these channels and look for something, depending on the query, it knows to reference those things. And today they also give you the links. So they also, let's say that someone asks a question and it finds a relevant Slack thread or Teams thread. It should, the newer LLMs, they also give you the link and it can direct the question, it can, give the response and also reference the source, right? Which is useful. Company docs, which I mentioned before. And lastly, I would say to summarize this slide, and again, this is kind of like a quick, a quick session, but it's not always that more documents, just throwing everything against the AI is good. You should be mindful against the junk, out of date, older documents that can create conflicting answers. So it is meaningful if you have 7 different documents describing the same thing and only one is current to try and avoid the older ones, even though they have dates. So LLMs now can definitely look into the file date and whatnot. They just don't always do that, right? So that's where you, again, all of this thing is you taking these things, trying to build it, seeing how good it is, but then going back to these pointers, hopefully, and seeing, okay, wait, it's still not accurate. Maybe we're feeding it too much junk, or maybe we didn't connect something that can be quite helpful. Accuracy, I guess, is my I think it's my last topic. So all of this goes a lot against trial and error. So once you have these things that I've shown in that diagram connected, get a group of users to start testing it, and start testing it with questions and answers that would kind of preempt the governance use cases that you'll want to try and roll out, right? First, start with asking questions about definitions. You can ask about all kinds of objects, whether it's files or tables or views or dashboards. What do they do? See where the LLM is grabbing, because it gives you the sources. So see where it's grabbing the answers from. See if the answers look good. For the LLMs now, you can also add additional instructions, aka skills, that maybe give it a different, give it a specific styles of answers, or makes sure that it's short, or forces it to always give you the reference, which is a useful one. Like, you always want to answer, but list out the sources. LLMs don't always do that on their own. You have to actually instruct it to them, at least if I generalize. But the key is that once you start testing, you kind of see, hopefully you get to a state where the answer looks like something, at least on the surface. I mean, you need to start testing for accuracy, but at least it looks good. Like, people are running this thing daily, and the answers, both on the format side, but also in the actual information, in terms of where the LLM is going to get the response, it looks good at that state. And once you've done that, you can go to the next step, which is, okay, now let's work on automations. And what I also put here is just something that has been useful from our experience. Record the answers. So record the answers, meaning use an LLM or the agent. I mean, this is pretty table stakes for a lot of the agent platforms, but there's the ones that have memory and have the kind of like thumbs up, thumbs down. But because it's a large audience, I never know. Like, maybe your LLM doesn't have that yet, or maybe that doesn't go anywhere, or it doesn't really learn. So those things matter. If they're not built in, you can basically ask people to report sessions to you where the LLM gave something really bad, or something that was sort of okay, but collect these answers, because then you can also give that as context to the LLM, right? Everything is iterative in that universe. And the more mileage you get here, it would be more mature, essentially, at that stage. So this is kind of like the summary of, again, not necessarily foundational specific, but generally how you could approach that. And here I'm giving some examples of what we've seen that are not too crazy to implement, but pretty useful, let's call them agents, that save a lot of time. So code writing, deployment, schema change, for example, someone wants to understand, okay, if I change this field here, what does it do? That's a classic one that your LLM can answer. Now, sure, people can still go to some UI and start grabbing some information, but Q&A, you get the answer immediately, and people can use that. Sorry, the other thing is I guess I jumped forward. Agent management, in terms of getting visibility to what you have running, you want to maybe have a place that shows you kind of like what you have going on right now. And then context, I'll skip that from the, for the sake of time, to go to the use cases. Okay, let's skip that too, I think. Okay, here is where I'm talking about some examples. So data enrichment, basically the first context is first example of what I mentioned, answering questions, right? That is something that data teams have a lot going on, where people are asking them, oh, what is this field doing? What is this? How is this defined? Where is this coming from? All kinds of these things. Here, okay, knowledge assistant, structured data Q&A, document, comparing documents, all of this basically things that sometimes go to data governance teams, assuming the context that we've described before, the agents are well positioned to answer that. This is an interface. I don't remember which tool is this. Oh, this is Anthropic. So this is how Anthropic, if you have Claude, this is their agent interface. The one I showed you before, by the way, was OpenAI. So this is when we talked about using something that probably you already have for managing the agents. This is how it looks for them. You can create your own custom things, right? This is what they suggest, but you can create your own and expand for the data use cases and data governance use cases. So this is the Anthropic one. And now let's talk in the 2 remaining minutes about what we do and how we're doing it for our own stuff. But essentially, if I pause here, this session is pretty short in terms of Q&A. All the components is things that for the most part you have them today. You can just go and handle all of those connections, handle the context, start rolling it out, start playing with it, record the answers, start iterating it. That would already get you an interesting place, at least in terms of curiosity and understanding what can be applicable to your organization. So hopefully that entire thing was interesting and helpful. In the remaining 2 minutes, let's describe what we're doing, because essentially our thing is we package all of this together for you. Foundational, obviously we're in a data governance or data and AI governance conference, so everything here is governance. Our unique, let's call it secret sauce, is that we also analyze the source code, both for context, but also for understanding data flows. Moving not away, but not just doing the warehouse and the database kind of like traditional stuff, but also the Kafka topics and Spark pipelines and Java and mainframe and all kinds of things that large organizations have that move a lot of the data. This is basically our bread and butter. We know how to connect to the code and analyze it and generate that graph, which for our context, for our session today, that's essentially the context for the agentic stuff. In our case, that's the context. And the important point I will make is that LLMs are still not great in creating column level lineage. So if you have that covered today in your catalog, great. Going back to my point around why you need lineage, if you have that in good shape today in the catalog, that's already good and ready to be used by agents and whatnot. If not, deterministic lineage so that you get the column level dependencies. That's a key ingredient, again, for the efficiency and things that I argued before, and I need to stop soon. Metadata, here as well, you might be in a good shape today in your catalog, but there is a lot of value in grabbing more metadata and automating the process of documenting metadata, that this is where we can help you. This is our thing. Basically, we live across complicated stacks, so not just warehouse, but warehouses, databases, MongoDB, on-prem, cloud, and whatnot. And here is, I think, where I'll stop. So I think our thing in foundational, to wrap up, our core capability is data lineage, deterministic. We parse code to understand all the data flows, but we use that understanding of code to feed those governance agents. If that is interesting to you, we have a booth. We can show you how that looks like. Because we are also understanding the code, we also interact with the engineers across the organization. Whenever they make changes, we communicate to them, okay, your change here in this Kafka topic, it's actually now going to impact these things in the warehouse. And otherwise, they don't have the visibility. And in some industries, incidents are a very bad thing with immediate impact on revenue. In other industries, it can be increased risks or exposure. So all of these things, we're trying to essentially argue for better proactive governance is our kind of like a key thing. And we integrate with your tools. So we integrate with your catalogs, we integrate with your CI/CD. We kind of meet you where you are in terms of your legacy and cloud tools. And I think that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. Sorry I don't have time for questions, but feel free to catch me offline. Thank you.